Hello and welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. I'm Mike Philbeck, your host this week. We have Andy Dedman and Wes Westmoreland, two of our regular crew, and we have our regular substitute for Betsy, Roger Harris. Roger, glad to have you with us again.
It's always a pleasure to be with you boys.
Before we get into something really serious, Roger, last time you were here, you had your Carolina shirt on. You were all so proud. And Wes said you had pornography on, and now look at him today. He's got on something.
He does, and I am a Clemson Tiger fan this morning.
Well, I'm not a Carolina fan this morning, but I wasn't going to bring that up. I wasn't even going to mention it, but thank you, Mike.
Well, I think, no, just because you got a cup and a tie, it's where you don't have a tattoo in your forehead.
I've got it cut into the
That's
lack
right.
of hair back here. You just can't
Well,
see
if you
it.
can't tell, we're taping the night after in the Sweet 16. Clemson won and Carolina lost, so as we tape, it's kudos to Clemson for going to the Elite Eight, first time since in 44 years,
1980, yeah.
1980. Well, on to something more serious. This week we had one of the most significant politicians of the last several decades to pass away, unfortunately, at the age of 82 this week, Joe Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman, I think, was one of the last of a breed who sought to find compromise, Andy, so you could actually govern. And he worked against and for Democrats, against and for Republicans. If you remember, he and John McCain were big partners in trying to make some things happen. They were both kind of the middle of their parties. He was Al Gore's running mate in 2000, first Jewish person on a national ticket. Had a fall, was still working every day to do things. So I'm just going to kind of open it up, and you guys want to say something about the passing of one of America's icons of the last generation. Andy starts.
Well, the way what you said was very true. He was the last of a dying breed, and that was a statesman. And I think that's why he and John McCain got up, because so many Republicans despised John McCain because he wanted to work.
I was sort of among them at times.
I understand. But anyway, those are the people that get the work done when it needs to be done. They're not running around trying to get on one of the cable TV shows or get on a microphone somewhere. They really are there to do the people's work. And he will be mightily missed, and I hope that other people will learn from his example.
Actually, he was working the day before he died on a statement to President Biden and Democratic leaders saying that if they abandoned Israel to try to win Michigan and Wisconsin, where there's a lot of Palestinian, especially in Michigan, that it would come back to haunt him. He was very pro-Israel. Roger?
He was a great statesman. Sometimes I agreed with him, and sometimes I didn't, which is kind of the mark of a leader. I think he was a great friend of John McCain. I remember in John McCain's book, The Restless Wave, he said that he should have selected Lieberman instead of Barbie from Alaska. I don't know that would have changed the outcome of the election, but might have closed the gap a little bit. But we've lost a great statesman.
Well, it wouldn't have been near as attractive a ticket, I can tell you that. Wes?
Well, yeah, I agree generally with what's been said, except for Mr. Harris. No question, he was a statesman, and you know, politics is the art of compromise. That's what it takes, and that's something that's been lost today. And Lieberman was an excellent example. I didn't often agree with his politics, but I appreciated the way he was willing to sit down and work out things and come up with a solution that would benefit the taxpayers of the country.
Well, you sometimes have to draw a line over your principles, but where there's opportunity, some compromise is certainly necessary in governing. All right, we'll move on. I thought we'd talk about something local first. We have some new renovations announced by the county this week that are going to happen at the Cleveland County Fairgrounds. There are going to be some improvements done. Obviously, there's some costs. Obviously, there'll be some benefits. Andy, tell us what you know about it. What are they going to do? What's it going to cost and so forth?
Well, they've managed to come up with $2.7 million. I got a pretty good idea where it come from. Most people like most things from the Easter Bunny named Tim Moore, more than likely. he makes a run every so often. But it's stuff that needs to be done. Mainly you're talking about restrooms. They're going to build some new ones right beside, right where Atrium has always had their building. They're going to demolish that. That's right beside the fire department. They're going to demolish that, build it there, but they're also going to build a new fire station there. And let's face it, I mean, that thing was built who knows when. And here's a dilemma a lot of fire stations are having. The trucks they're getting now are much bigger than a lot of the bays they've got. And that's why a lot of them are having to build new buildings to accommodate the equipment now. And that's going to be pretty much the same thing. You know, they're trying to upgrade everything. They've been working on the wiring, electrical out there forever, plumbing. They're really trying to make this more of a user-friendly type place where, especially now, after all with COVID and all like that, everybody is so adamant about washing hands. And let's face it, sometimes that's kind of the dirtiest place around. And it's not as bad since they got rid of the sawdust and got everything paved. But I can remember, Wes, many a time, you probably can too, looking up on a Saturday night, looking up at the lights, and it looks like a fog bank up there.
Yep.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's stuff that needs to be done. It's going to be a good thing, I think, overall, to help with the experience of the Cleveland County Fair.
Well, Wes, you know, back years ago, you'll remember this, there was a lot of talk about whether the fairgrounds needed to be moved somewhere way outside of Shelby because it's sitting right in the heart of town, a lot of population around it. We can see and hear the fireworks at my house easily whenever they're done, but apparently we've spent enough money out there improving it, I guess it's where it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
Well, you know, you've got a love-hate relationship with it, as many in the county do. People say it takes a lot of money out of the county. People say it brings a lot in, but you know, it's been such a significant part of Cleveland County's history. And if we're going to have a fair, we need to have the infrastructure to support it. And I think restrooms and emergency services are a critical part of that. I think these improvements also allow for that property to be used for even more things throughout the year, because right now it's probably a stretch with the facilities they have. And I think this is going to improve that greatly and open some opportunities for that property to be better utilized more throughout the year. So,
one huge help a number of years ago when the David Dry apartment complex was built near the fairgrounds, they put in a sewer pump station, and the fairgrounds was able to get city sewer, which they didn't have until basically the 21st century. Roger?
I agree. The Cleveland County Fair is the largest agricultural fair in North Carolina, and just has been an important part. I've been a diabetic for 20 years, and I think I caught it from a fried Twinkie out at the fair. and you know, when you think of how many households in Cleveland County must have started with the first date out to the fair, it's just important. The upgrades to the restrooms are important, and you're right. The washing of hands and these new restrooms are going to have touchless faucets and the air dryers. That's going to be part of it. One upgrade they're doing that was not in the newspaper is the new camera system. The camera security system that's been out there has been there for 20 years. Obviously, technology's changed a lot in 20 years, and there's going to be a new camera system to provide security. So it's we've got a good fair, and it's getting even better.
Roger, you know, about the time you and I got old enough to get in free, they quit doing it.
That's it. That's
and,
right.
and, you know, the agriculture aspect is a significant thing.
Absolutely.
This has always been an agrarian county, and that's still part of our roots here that a lot of our young people don't know till they go walk through the cattle barn or the poultry barn or whatever. It's great exposure for young people.
Let me get on my soapbox just 1 minute, Mike, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The one thing I feel like we're slowly losing our way is what you just touched on, Wes. We are not featuring agriculture. Now it's become about the carnival, about the midway down there. And I made a suggestion one time, why don't we have some more, I mean, we've got wineries all over upper end of this county. Why don't we do something like that? We have got some organic farming that is going on. Why don't we show what agriculture in the 21st century is looking like here in
You're a
Cleveland County?
stockholder. Why don't you get it done?
They ignore me like they would you, Mike. That's
Or you like the rest of us?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
So all I can say is that's a story for another day.
All right. Well, good improvements going on at the Cleveland County Fairgrounds. Kudos to the county for being able and willing to do that. So a long time North Carolina House member Michael Ray, who was defeated by less than 35 votes this year in his district by Rodney Pierce. Rodney Pierce, by the way, is one of those who were on the lawsuit that was turned down this week down east on the Senate districts. He's one of the plaintiffs, but he's going to be he doesn't have a opponent, I don't think, so he's going to be a person there. But Brockman challenged it, and he questioned it, and got thrown out. And it just reminded me, Andy, of something that you've said a lot of times. The centrist Democrats just don't seem to have a place in the party anymore. Another one that barely won was Cecil Brockman, a black gentleman in High Point area who won about as narrowly as this gentleman lost. And you had 3 or 4 centrist Democrats to go, including Michael Woodard, who's somewhat more centrist in the Senate, got beat. Of course, he had run for mayor of Durham and would have left anyway if he'd have won that. But Andy, for a long time, we had what we called the business Democrats, like Bass Knight and David Hoyle, and they would work with Republicans sometimes and sometimes not. But you know, this is your kind of ballywick. What do you think? Where are we at with this? Are we just so polarized on both sides you can't elect a Republican in a primary if they're to the center? Last week we talked about, of course, you know, a couple of the Council of State Republicans that won were very unexpected and very far to the right compared to the Republicans they beat. So are we just polarized for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think we are. We're basically up a creek with a broke paddle. And I mean, we don't have a way back to the center. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, Representative Ray, he came, I think the year after I was shown the door, and he was very much voted the way I did. I mean, did I vote for some Republican stuff? Yes. When Republicans were in a majority, did I vote for their budget? Yes, because that's what you do. That's what grown-up big people do. When you're elected to govern, you govern. You get the best deal you can, and you move on, and you don't throw a tantrum. Now, we had a couple that would do that in caucus and West. You've seen how some people, they'll just stand up and rend their clothes and sackcloth and ashes and all that over trying to do something. We just got to fight them. We just got to fight them. Well, no, you stand your ground on a principle you have and what you think, but you try to get to the middle. You give the other guy half a loaf so he can go home and declare victory just like you can. But it bugs me to no end that the Young Democrats in North Carolina did this. I mean, because that was an organization I was very involved in, along with Wayne Goodwin back in our younger days, Roger. And in fact, I was selected as one of the top 5 Young Democrats in the state one time. And to see what has become of that organization, I mean, it's like I said here one time, it's like kids running with scissors. I mean, they're able to have something that could do some great harm. And I feel like they have done some great harm because they've silenced a part of the Democratic Party that needed to be represented.
What do you think, Roger, about the difficulty of the centrist on really either side winning the primary?
I start to say it's both sides. The Young Democrats and the College Democrats need a grown-up in the room, and that person is just not there. But polarization has hurt both parties, in my judgment. You know, Wes said a few minutes ago that compromise is the art of politics. Neither side seems to be willing to compromise. And the reality is that extreme primary election voters result in extreme primary election candidates. And that's
general election.
And that's right, in general election. And you know, we see it on both sides. There's no way that a truly objective, intelligent person could argue that the best Republican candidate was selected for governor recently. It's the extremes on both sides. Both parties have a primary problem.
Yeah. Wes, what say you? You're not quite as much of a compromiser as Andy is.
I'm also a better dresser than he is.
Okay. Yeah, I think this goes back to the Lieberman discussion. I mean, we had an individual did not compromise on moral issues, but compromised on non-relevant issues to bring about something positive. And Mike, we're running short on time, so I'm just going to leave it with a quote from the Young Democrats of the president of the Young Democrats. It is anti-black to save money in our state budget by dismantling public education, while Republicans have increased funding every year since they've been in charge, while some of these people that have been challenged voted to increase funding, but now it's anti-black. And that's a big part of the problem. Everything's turned into a moral issue when you're on the extreme, and everything is not.
Well, clearly now, Andy, moderate Democrats or center-left Democrats, like I guess you were, pretty
You
much
guessed.
to the, well, I mean, I don't know how you want to be characterized, but you were pretty close to the center, I think.
I always thought I was sitting, in the center.
You're just considered too conservative by the dominant portion of your party, and likewise, somebody like Catherine Truitt last month or this month is not considered conservative enough by the primary voters in the Republican Party.
It was kind of funny. One of the reporters down there at the NNO called us the Andy Griffith Caucus. Said led by Jim Black, and they named me, and I think there was a handful of other Jim. I forget who all else there, but there were several other ones, and I thought that was I always enjoyed.
I think
that.
that'd be a good club to be
I
in.
thought it was.
Well, folks, we have tossed around a couple of issues, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Ronald McDaniel, former RNC chairman, lasting 4 days at NBC.
Between your job, your family, and other demands on your time, life can get pretty hectic. So we want you to take time for yourself. Hi, I'm Jennifer Harrell, and I want you to join me for your health. Each month, the Cleveland County Health Department and C19 TV will explore topics that affect you and your family's health. We'll discuss the importance of exercise, a healthy diet, and regular health screenings and checkups. From fitness tips to warning signs to the latest healthcare news. For Your Health will help keep you in shape and up to date in Cleveland County. We want you to be your best, so join us each month for Your Health, right here on Spectrum Cable and online, c19.tv.
Welcome back to the second half of Political Smackdown. Ronald McDaniel was for several years the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and she left after it became obvious early in March that Trump was going to be the nominee. He wanted someone else. He actually got the RNC chairman for North Carolina that he supported, and
And a relative.
and his daughter-in-law. So Ronald McDaniel struck a deal for $600,000 for a 2-year contract with NBC News, which of course includes, I call it now, MSDNBC, their cable outlet. So she did one interview on Meet the Press on the next to last Sunday in March, and there was just an explosion of all the talking heads on NBC and MSNBC that their executives were wrong, they shouldn't have done it, and she needed to go. And within 4 days, a couple days after that Meet the Press interview, she was fired. She hadn't broken her contract, didn't violate it, so they probably are going to have to pay her the $600,000 that they agreed with her over 2-year periods to be a contributor. I just want to talk about what does this tell us about the state of journalism generally and NBC specifically. Is there no longer any room in the mainstream media for even one conservative opinion that doesn't abandon those opinions when they get there? I mean, they've got Joe Scarborough, they've got former RNC chair Michael Steele, but they're no longer Republicans. I think that's a given. Wes, what do you make of this?
Well, first, we miss Walter Cronkite, no question about that. 4 days and $600,000. What I found interesting was the chair apologized and said it undermined the goal of a cohesive and aligned newsroom. Is that not in and of itself an admission of bias? Why would you want an aligned newsroom? If we were all aligned at this table, would this show be any fun? Would it be of any value to anybody out there? You know, trust in the media is at an all-time low, and this is why. I think there are way too many partisans in the media. It's no longer news, it's opinion. I think there are a few places, I read Reason.com, we read Carolina Journal, Mike, outlets such as FEE and ARI and AIER, they're all philosophically based, they're well done, but I think you've got to get the news from what you read more than what you watch, and quite frankly, Brett Baer is the only worthwhile news show on TV today. And I think MSNBC, or I call them PMSNBC, but I think this is just an obvious flagrant admission of bias.
Roger, one of the things I thought was funny, I listened to Rachel Maddow and Scarborough and is it his wife now, Mika? They're married
Mika,
now.
yeah.
aren't
Married.
they? You remember I had that one figured out before you did.
You
Remember that?
did. Hey, you did.
But anyway, when Stacey Abrams said she was the rightful governor after she lost and she refused to accept the election, she was welcomed on MSNBC because Ronald McDaniel had questioned whether Trump really lost for a while after the November election and had stood for it. She's not welcome. I mean, is that not the height of hypocrisy? Roger, your turn.
This is like the man that killed a copperhead in his yard, and then his neighbor said, "Why do you hate all animals?" That's just not the point. She's probably going to get her money, but this is a lesson to NBC News. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. It is a fallacy to argue that the major news networks do not have conservatives on. ABC News, that same Sunday morning that we watched this program, ABC News has as one of their commentators, Trump Chief of Staff Priebus. He's on there and speaks. Diane Sawyer came from the Nixon White House. ABC News has hired, as I say, Priebus. Nicole Wallace came from George W.'s communication director. It's not an issue of having conservatives on there. The issue is that she played an active role in trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election, not just speaking about it, but in her home state of Michigan, she actually pressured local officials not to certify Biden's election. There is a world of difference between a conservative and an anti-democratic election denier.
So Hillary should be banned from all TV.
Hillary has not been hired as a consultant on the network.
She's on TV a lot.
She is on TV, as is Newt Gingrich and the others. But you don't pay them $600,000 to come on. I don't mind the lady coming on as a guest, but it was wrong to hire her and have her become a journalist.
She said on that program that she was just defending what she didn't think was really shown at the time, and there was still a lot of doubt well after January 6th, and a lot of people still doubt today. A majority of Republican primary voters still think that election was rigged 3 years later.
And the reason they think that is because they've been told that over and over and over by people like her, in spite of the
look at
fact
all
there were
the antics.
there were 60 court cases.
You had like
60.
after the fact in Pennsylvania, you had 100 times or more mail-in ballots counted for up to a week or two after the election under the name of the COVID crisis.
Hey, Wes, how you doing? Good to see you.
Oh, I'm
But-
enjoying
but,
this.
But that was perfectly legal. In a pandemic, you're going to have more mail-in
Sometimes
ballots.
not legal. It violated the law.
Sometimes legal is wrong, and if you remember, that law was never properly passed in Pennsylvania. It was declared by some Secretary of State or something.
Well, they're the ones that are in charge of elections in most states.
But it was
They
in
were the ones that have-
violation of explicit law.
Well, the thing of it is, here's the real thing. This has nothing to do with her being a Republican chair. This is about personal problems they had with her as a Trump-ite kind of.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what this really boils down to. She was not accessible. They tried their best to try to give her an opportunity the whole year she was there. She would not avail herself of that. She would not go on anything but Fox. And there is no way you can convince me that you're going to be able to make a case for your personal beliefs if you already are preaching to the same people that already agree with you. And she never would stand to be challenged. And that is why there was such an outrage over this. If she hadn't been so egregious in some of the stuff that she said and participated in, there wouldn't have been that. But
If
I mean,
she hadn't been chairman under Trump,
If she
Wouldn't
hadn't
have
been
been a problem.
chairman of the party, she probably wouldn't have been as strong. But what's the role of the chairman of the national party on either side?
well, it's not to go out there and false off onto the public that there's been an election stole out from under them.
Well,
I mean, it's not true. It's not true.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence.
there
I
was
mean,
lots of evidence that was at the time that was never properly explained.
they
And
had
what was that?
60 court cases, Michael. 60.
And how many of them were left-wing judges?
Over and over. Some of the judges were appointed by President Trump. You know that.
A few, but I'm just telling you, I think
A
there's
few.
still a lot of doubt about that election.
and there's no question there was fraud and there were violations of the law.
Oh,
my
Would it have made a
goodness.
difference? Probably not.
That's
But
right.
there's no question that there were concerns. and how some of that was
There's
handled.
always going to be that. I mean, you're
Of
going to
course
have
there
some
is.
things.
Just like
and-
there
and
was
as
a
big as
few
it-
years earlier
Well,
when Hillary pitched a fit
well,
about an election
But
being
then
stolen.
we had 2000. You had Bush and Gore, and after it had all been examined and looked at, and Gore did the right thing and stood up and said, "We have a new president," and that was the end of it.
Well, Mike,
The
I'm
end of
glad
it.
we've established we were right.
Oh my gosh!
So we've settled that one.
All right, let's get out of this and go on to the lightning round, because we're going to always disagree about the 2020 election outcome and the way that it was decided. Lightning round. Rogers, lead us off.
The Republican candidate for State Superintendent of Public Education is Michelle Mara. Michelle Mara has 5 children. She does not send any of her children to public schools, and she has urged others not to send their children to public schools. She calls schools indoctrination centers. Michelle Mara is running for Superintendent of Public Education and will not send her children to public schools. Just think about that.
She's not by herself this day and time. Andy?
Well, since it is the Easter season, I thought I'd give it a little bit. I had a question down, at New Way Laundry, all the center of the universe down there. A question was asked of me, said, where does Easter Bunny come from, and why is that tangled up in the resurrection? And I did some research in this, and what it is, it was a folk tale brought from Germany in the early 1600s, when the Germans started immigrating to Pennsylvania. It was a tale about a rabbit that would lay colored eggs. And that's where it started coming, and then it morphed into other things. But also, if you go back and look in the past, the rabbit has always been a sign of fertility and of new life, because they tend to spring up when the weather gets better. So that's how it kind of got into it. It really has no religious connotation to it, but it's just something that got added on.
Well, little known, Easter egg hunts really were invented by the reformer Martin Luther, too. Men would hide eggs for women and children to find and discuss the resurrection and the new life of the open tomb in Luther's day.
Interesting. I want a chance to rebut Principal Harris, but I won't take that time right now. We all watched the horrific videos of the collapse of the Key Bridge in Maryland, but the response has really been surprising. The U.S. president went on television immediately to state that the taxpayers would pay the full cost of rebuilding the bridge, apparently bypassing any insurance claims from the shipping company. And the Mexican president stated that the collapse shows how poorly illegal immigrants are treated in the United States. How dare he? There are times when I wonder what hope there may be in a world led by people like Bowden and Obrador.
Wow. We got a few seconds. I followed an interesting article this week in New Hanover County. They're going to have to cut 200 positions in their school system, which is, 2.5 times larger than ours, Roger. But one of the reasons why they're going to have to cut about half of them, including about 47 teachers, is they don't get money from the county. They used ESSER funds from COVID, which is what you call the COVID funds, elementary and secondary school emergency funds, to fund permanent positions. Folks, if you're in local government, you should never fund anything permanent unless you have recurring revenue. See you next week.